Next on In Close, a special EarthFix report on food waste. Billions of tons of uneaten food ending up in landfills every year.
You see it in the container and it's just wasteful. You see how much you're wasting. It's just kind of gross.
There are still lots of things going in the garbage can that shouldn't be going in there. Food is really the big one that shouldn't be in your garbage can.
What it's doing to the local environment and to the planet. Also, how people in Seattle will have to start paying if they don't put food waste in the right trash bin. Plus, some innovative local solutions to use food waste to power plants and cars. Food waste and climate change, a special EarthFix report next on In Close. So you're probably wondering why we have this giant pile of food on the table. This is between 200 and 300 pounds of food, not counting the packaging. And this is the amount that the average person wastes every year. Perfectly good edible food. And now it's a problem that most people probably don't spend a lot of time thinking about. So tonight we're going in close on food waste. And Katie Campbell, you're our EarthFix correspondent. You and the EarthFix team have been looking into this for a couple of months now.
Yes, Deborah, that's right. The average American wastes 290 pounds of food in a given year. For the average family of four, that translates into between $1,000 and $2,500 worth of food a year.
Wow.
Nationwide, we throw away $165 billion, that's billion with a B, $165 billion worth of food. It's a problem because not only are we wasting all that food, but it's having major impacts on the environment, overflowing landfills and contributing in big ways to climate change.
Every Sunday, Brian and Sarah Mills chop enough veggies to make a week's worth of salad lunches.
There's no question. What am I going to have for lunch on Thursday? I know I am having a salad for lunch on Thursday, and it's going to be the exact same salad I had last Thursday and the Thursday before that.
Salads help the family watch what they eat. They also help them cut back on the food they bring home, but don't eat.
By just thinking ahead about our food prep, it makes it so that we have less food waste overall.
By carefully planning meals, the family avoids overspending on food that rots before they get a chance to eat it. But even the best laid plans don't always work out.
We have two kids, and they sometimes eat what we put on their plate.
Not always.
Yeah.
After dinner, the scraps pile up in a Tupperware bin on the counter.
You see it in the container and it's just wasteful. You see how much you're wasting. It's just kind of gross. Yeah.
Gross in a different way than yucky.
Yeah.
It's gross as in it's grossly wasteful.
About 40% of food produced in the United States is wasted. In just one day, Americans throw away enough food to feed the entire Seattle metro area for 2 weeks. Of course, avoiding food waste entirely isn't possible. Some parts of food just aren't edible. But because the Mills live in a Seattle suburb, their food waste doesn't have to be tossed in the garbage. Their kids already know where the food scraps go.
We throw in the yard waste.
Seattle is one of the few major U.S. cities, along with Portland and San Francisco, to have curbside composting. But the program hasn't solved the problem. Spend a morning collecting Seattle's trash, and you'll see food, food, and more food. At the South Seattle dump, Dieter Eccles is leading a crew that's analyzing random samples of the city's garbage. The team hand sorts everything into more than 100 different categories.
This looks like it's got some more food in it.
Measuring exactly what people are throwing out paints a picture of what could have been recycled or composted. The team has done similar studies in most major U.S. cities, and they found that Seattle is at the forefront, diverting 10 times the food waste of the rest of the country. But there's room for improvement.
There are still lots of things going in the garbage can that shouldn't be going in there. Food is really the big one that shouldn't be in your garbage can.
Even though Seattle has been collecting food scraps for nearly a decade, many residents continue to throw food in the trash.
Food.
So much so that by weight, food still makes up about 20% of the garbage.
When you look at it in a pile, it's a pretty small piece of the pile, but by weight, it's by far the largest single piece of the garbage is food.
The Environmental Protection Agency estimates that nationwide, 36 million tons of food are thrown away each year. That's the equivalent of 7,000 dump trucks worth of food every single day. Only about 5% of that gets diverted from the landfill and turned into compost. Food waste takes up valuable space in landfills, and once it's there, it releases methane, a greenhouse gas that's 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. One study estimates that removing food waste from the landfills would be like taking 1 out of every 5 cars off the road. Stephen Banchero is the CEO of Cedar Grove Composting in Western Washington. It's one of the largest operations of its kind in the country.
We're handling over 75,000 tons of food waste a year, escalating each year, pulling that directly out of the landfill and making soil out of it.
In the United States, topsoil is depleted 10 times faster than it's replaced. It takes hundreds of years to create 1 inch of topsoil naturally. At Cedar Grove, it takes less than 2 months to convert a heap of organic waste into compost.
There's always a need for the soil. Food waste composting, the whole intent of it is to make soil that can then be reused.
Each day, about 700 tons of organic waste is trucked in, and a fraction of that, about 10 to 15%, is food. The organic matter is run through a grinder and mixed to distribute the nutrient-rich food scraps among the grass clippings and woody debris. It's then stored in piles where microbes set to work. Air movement through the stacks is carefully controlled to speed up the process. As more food scraps arrive at Cedar Grove, they're also seeing an increase in food packaging materials that don't break down.
This is straight plastic. A piece of plastic, if it goes through the grinder, that piece of plastic is now 10 small pieces of plastic.
They use a variety of methods to sift out small pieces of glass, plastic, and metal, but they're all expensive, and small bits still make it through.
You know, you have to pay attention to what you're getting in your container. We don't want half food waste and half plastic. We can't accept the plastic.
Tim Kroll is the solid waste director for Seattle Public Utilities. On Kroll's watch, the city is recycling 56% of its garbage. That's good, but it's not good enough to meet the target Seattle set for itself by 2016.
The rate that we've been going the last 2 years would get us to our 60% recycling goal in about 8 years. We really have to do something different. We can't just, sit out there and root more.
Seattle City Council recently voted to start cracking down. Starting in 2015, food waste and compostable paper will no longer be allowed to go in the garbage. Families who break the rules will be fined $1 whole. The fine, Kroll says, really isn't about the money.
We're not out there to get a bunch of money on these fees. A single banana peel or apple core is not going to do it. We will pick it up and dump it, but we will leave a note that we're levying a $1 fee.
The rules will go into effect in January, but garbage collectors won't start levying fines until July. You probably won't find the Mills family getting hit with a fine for shirking their composting duties.
It's one of those things that it's just so simple, and why not? Is it really that much more difficult? Our 7 and 5-year-olds do it.
It's not very difficult just to put something in a bin.
So simple, even a child could do it. So Katie, why is it better? I mean, this is food we're talking about. It's going to decompose wherever you put it. So why is it better if it decomposes in a compost heap versus a landfill?
Well, it's a little technical, but the bottom line is that what happens in a compost heap is a different process. They're adding oxygen to it, so the results, the gas that comes off of it is carbon dioxide, as opposed to in a landfill, there's no oxygen added to it, so that's where you get the methane.
So do we have a sense of how many people right now are doing the right thing and putting their food waste in the compost?
Well, in Seattle, it's much higher, but in Greater King County, just about everybody has the option of putting food scraps in their yard waste bin, but in a study of a given week, only about 13% actually do it. So we wanted to find out, why is this so difficult? We spent some time with somebody who's been composting basically since the program began a decade ago, and she's become kind of a composting guru. We went to visit her to see how complicated or not this really is.
The perception is that composting is reserved for this fringe culture that just loves swimming around in its own banana peels. But I think the reality is that everybody can do it. My name is Lauren Zamsky, and I am 8.5 months along in my pregnancy and still composting. So I sort of say to myself, if it was alive at some point, it can go into the compost. And if it wasn't, then it doesn't. So things like fruits and vegetables, peels, pits, those sorts of things. We should take the stickers off of things. And the reason is there's an adhesive and there's plastic involved in those, and those do not break down. And anything that has a plastic or a metal component shouldn't go in there. Keeping it out of sight and clean is really important. Obviously you don't want a giant bucket of garbage on your countertop, so we keep ours down below. This is our actual compost bin. This is just our scrap bowl for the kitchen. So I try to make this as easy as possible. I have a set of rubber gloves down here because even though I love separating my garbage, I'm not a fan of touching it. So I just scrape all that in there, cover this up, just rinse off my gloves, and we're ready to take this guy outside. It's that easy. I would say give composting a try. It's not that hard, it's not that gross. I think we think, oh, it's just one more thing to do in your day. It's not, and it's literally seconds. When you add it up at the end of the day, it's seconds out of your day. Are seconds really too much to ask to separate your garbage and, you know, clean up Seattle? I don't think it is.
Okay, so what's the big deal if you forget to take the sticker off the apple or the avocado?
Well, the big deal is that those things are made out of plastic, and then you end up with plastic in your compost. But the bigger problem is when you put plastic in the compost bin, it ruins the whole bag, so it has to be thrown out.
I see.
So I need to understand, if I forget to take the sticker off the avocado, the whole thing gets thrown in the garbage then?
Well, I should clarify. It's when it gets to the point of like more than 10% of the stuff that's in your compost bin is plastic or not compostable, then it has to be thrown out.
Okay.
So it's really important to get it right. And raw food scraps, that's easy, that's clear. But where people are having confusion is the containers, the paper plates, the plastic looking things, the silverware. That's where people aren't sure where it goes. So we've cleared the food and we've brought in some other items because we're going to have a little test. And the test is what goes where. Does it go in the recycling, does it go in the compost bin, or does it go in the garbage? Stephen, we're going to start with you. The Starbucks coffee cup, where does it go?
The cup, I think everything but the straws goes in recycle.
You're close. So if the coffee is gone, the cup goes into the recycling, the lid goes into the recycling, the straws go into the trash, but the little cozy, that goes into the compost. But it's because the cup is lined with plastic that it can't go into the compost bin. Stacy, the silverware. What would you do with this pile of silverware?
The pressure. Well, it's green, so that should be friendly environmental color, but it feels very plasticky. I don't see any sort of label on it. I would recycle this. This one, this I can see. It has very clearly labeled compostable.
Yeah, so this is happening a lot where people are making things a green color to make it seem like it's environmentally friendly, but it actually isn't. So you can't recycle those, and they are supposed to go in the trash. But the white ones are compostable. So Cassandra, what about those tea bags?
Tea bags? Well, I don't see anything on here that wouldn't be compostable. Sometimes tea bags have a little like staples on them, but if they didn't, I would put them in the compost.
And actually, in Seattle anyway, even if they do have that tiny little staple on them, they're okay with you putting that in the compost. It's so tiny that it's not going to make that big of a difference. For some reason, stickers, no, but the staples in tea bags are okay.
All right.
And Stephen, what about the pizza box?
We eat a lot of pizza, and I put them in compost.
But what about the little tiny triangle thing on the inside?
A little tray. I think that goes in the trash.
Yep, can't put that in the compost bin. And finally, Deborah, what about the takeout container of food?
I would always think that these could be recycled, but I think they're supposed to be thrown away.
Well, actually, it totally depends on what's on the bottom
What's
of
on the
that.
bottom? Okay, you've got to check it out.
You got to check it out, and in this case, there's not just food in there, but there's also little containers of dressing. And so you have to, whatever food is left over has to be dumped in the compost bin, and that dressing packet has to go in the trash. And then this is rinsed out, and if it says it's got a recycling label on the bottom, then that goes in the recycling. So it's 3 different places.
And Katie, if you're still confused, you're going to take this whole conversation onto social media. We can follow you there.
Yep, we started a social media campaign under the hashtag #CompostFail. So if you see people doing things wrong, putting things in the wrong place, take a picture of it, upload it to social media, and hashtag it #CompostFail, and we'll watch for your pictures.
Well, it's not just fast food restaurants, it's not just individual homes. Grocery stores are also responsible for a lot of food waste. And Katie Campbell, you've been looking into an interesting solution here that's being pioneered locally.
That's right. The U.S. Department of Agriculture estimates that about $15 billion of unsold fruits and veggies goes in the trash. At most grocery stores, that would go in the trash, but at one local chain, not anymore.
Walk into just about any supermarket and you'll see a beautiful bounty of fresh food. But behind the eye-catching displays is a far less appetizing truth. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, every year more than 21 million tons of food sold in retail stores never makes it to consumers. 1 in 7 truckloads of perishables delivered to grocery stores will be thrown out. Most of the losses happen in the produce aisle.
We have over 350 fruits and vegetables. There's a lot of food that will go past sell date or be unsellable for one reason or another.
To meet consumer demands, grocers tend to stock only the most attractive produce. Anything less than perfect gets pitched.
Most grocery stores have no choice but to put their food scraps in with the trash.
But at PCC Natural Market in Issaquah, Washington, food scraps don't go in the trash. And they don't get composted either. They're put in a machine called a harvester.
Our food scraps go immediately into the harvester where they're processed. There is no odor.
Inside, everything is blended into a liquid and stored in a sealed tank. The harvester is the brainchild of a team of former Microsoft executives. They wondered if they could use data to attack the problem of commercial food waste. Larry Lesueur is the CEO.
As we looked at this food waste issue and we started asking the questions of why it was occurring, no one had the answers. There was no data, there was no metrics on it. So we looked at this and said, if we could capture the metrics, if we could understand the data behind it, we could alter behavior.
Every pile of food that goes into a harvester is weighed and coded by what department it came from. That real-time data is sent to grocers so that they can see exactly where they're losing food. But how do they get rid of that silo of blended food scraps?
We put all this energy and effort into growing this food source, and then we're trying to figure out how do we make it all go away conveniently. We're not benefiting from all this hard effort that we got from our society in growing the food in the first place.
If you view the food scraps as a waste, you've missed the point. Food scraps are a resource.
Victor Tyrone is Weiserg's chief science officer.
The aroma.
He wondered if that slurry of food waste could be turned into an organic fertilizer.
The potential is massive. You're talking about the need for millions of gallons of organic fertilizer. We might expect a harvester to produce maybe 10,000 gallons of fertilizer over a period of time, but the need is for millions of gallons of fertilizer.
They started analyzing the liquid in the lab and figured out that they could indeed turn what was once meant to be food for people into food for plants. But would this organic fertilizer be effective in large-scale crop production? Ted Andrews is one of the owners of Herb Co. It's an organic culinary herb farm that started in Duvall, Washington, and now has farms in 8 states.
We put fresh herbs in little packages and sell them through grocery stores.
Organic farming can be more challenging, but Andrews says it's worth it.
As a steward of the land, I prefer to have organic inputs rather than conventional inputs that could run off into the Snoqualmie River, which is right over there.
When a Weizerg representative told Andrews about a fertilizer made from food scraps, it sounded too good to be true.
I have a lot of people trying to sell me products of all kinds and always have a healthy skepticism, but I dared him to prove it to me.
They set aside a field of basil as a test plot and started using Weizerg fertilizer in their drip irrigation system. A few months later, the difference was measurable. The Weizerg basil had 30% more biomass. The leaves were bigger, and the color was deeper than basil in other fields.
It turns out it actually is quite a bit more effective than what we're used to.
Andrews says he hopes to use the Weizerg fertilizer on more of his fields next year. Then he'll have even more herbs to package up and send to supermarkets. And farmers aren't the only ones who can buy this food waste fertilizer. It's also being sold on supermarket shelves, including the PCC where the food scraps came from in the first place.
Not only are we making a difference with the food waste and preventing it from happening, we're doing it in a sustainable way, and we're doing it in an environmentally friendly way that makes economic sense for the business.
For the Weizerg team, this idea of closing the food waste circle could be a model for supermarkets across the country.
So, Katie, is there a chance that other grocery stores might end up picking up on this idea?
Well, Weizerg just added Whole Foods supermarkets to their customer list. So that's the first supermarket chain that goes beyond the Northwest. So it's possible that in the next few years, we might actually see these harvesters in grocery stores around the country.
So turning food waste into fertilizer is a unique idea, but Cassandra Profita, you found another interesting solution to the food waste problem.
Yeah, if you think about it, food is our fuel. And some local researchers thought, well, maybe food waste could be another kind of fuel. If food can power people, maybe food waste could power something like race cars. Remember that last scene in Back to the Future?
Wait a minute, what are you doing, Doc? I need fuel.
Back in 1985, using food waste for fuel seemed about as far off as flying cars. But now, it's reality. Welcome to the future. Matt Kaufman is a professional Formula Drift driver.
Drifting is the ballet of motorsports. It's not racing, it's dancing.
In a drift competition, two cars squeal around tight turns, one following the other and trying to match its precision. Each contest is an intense 30 to 45 seconds.
It's the tire smoke, it's the cars going sideways at close to 100 miles an hour, it's the sound of the tires, it's the sound of the engines.
Motorsports aren't usually thought of as environmentally friendly, but Kaufman's team is breaking that stereotype. This year, they switched to a new fuel to offset their carbon footprint. Now, Kaufman's car, like the DeLorean in Back to the Future, runs on food waste.
People are just all around surprised to hear that we are running a race car off of food-based products. It's just unheard of.
Kaufman says the ethanol, called Thunderbolt race fuel, actually runs his car better than petroleum-based racing fuel.
But with this fuel, it is 100% consistent all the time. It's amazing.
The fumes are also less toxic for him to breathe. And there's another unexpected benefit.
The exhaust smells like berries.
You heard that right. The exhaust smells like berries. That's because the ethanol comes from a company in Cornelius, Oregon that makes dried fruit. Mark Smith is the owner of Summit Foods, the company that makes the fuel. He says the idea was born out of a problem. The process of drying fruit meant lots of sugary waste juice.
We just kept talking about what do we do with this waste. Landfill didn't want it, and the sewer, it was very, very expensive to, so we just kept storing and storing it.
Then they started fermenting the juice and distilling it into very pure alcohol, or ethanol.
We'd like to, at some point, do millions of gallons a year of waste stream ethanol, and we'll just keep working on it till we get it.
Kaufman says it's only a matter of time before food waste ethanol goes beyond the racetrack.
If the Thunderbolt all-natural eco-friendly fuel is not only better than the other racing fuels, it would be by far better than the low-quality fuels that Americans are served every single day into their domestic cars.
In fact, Kaufman says it just might be the fuel of the future.
Wow.
So several projects in the Northwest are proving that food waste can be used to fuel our cars, power our homes, and run city buses.
And we've got some of those stories online. We've got links to them on our website, kcts9.org. Thanks, Cassandra. Thanks, Katie. Thanks to the EarthFix team for this special report on food waste. Some final thoughts tonight. Food waste is truly a global problem. According to the United Nations, if we added up all the methane emissions from landfills and compared that to the greenhouse gas emissions of countries around the world, food waste would literally equal its own country, emitting the third most greenhouse gases behind only China and the United States. If you want to find out what's compostable and recyclable in your area, check with your local utility for detailed information. We've put some links on our website, kcts9.org/inclose. We won't be wasting our 200-pound pile of food. It's all being donated to a local nonprofit to assist families in need for Thanksgiving. That's all for tonight's show. You can see all of tonight's stories online. You can send us an email to inclose@kcts9.org. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. I'm Deborah Wong. Good night. Next time on In Close, people making a difference, changing lives in their community, from helping troubled youth to changing our perceptions about the homeless. Making a difference on the next In Close, Thursday at 7 here on KCTS 9.
In Close is a production of KCTS 9 in collaboration with KUOW 94.9 News and Information.